"You're mine, Omega." The Alpha King snarled as his trembling bride couldn't escape his touch. Dark clouds rolled across the sky like heavy velvet, blotting out the sun, as if the heavens themselves were warning the land of the storm to come. In the heart of the kingdom, perched like a sentinel of shadow and stone, rose the castle of the Alpha King, Valerian. Its towers pierced the clouds, its walls were carved from black granite, and its gates had never known weakness. Inside the great hall, the torchlight flickered against tapestries depicting generations of kings and warriors, their faces proud, yet solemn. The air was thick with expectation, for today marked the day when the kingdom would see the arrival of the Omega, the one who would bind her fate to Valerian's. A soft knock echoed through the hall, gentle yet deliberate. The guards glanced at one another, then at the doors, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords. Slowly, the doors creaked open, and in stepped the Omega. Her name was Seraphina, though few spoke it aloud, as if saying it too loudly might summon the storms surrounding her destiny. She moved with quiet grace, her hair the color of autumn dusk, her eyes a shade of gray that mirrored the tempest outside. Her hands were clasped in front of her, trembling slightly, not with fear of the king, but with the weight of the unknown she now carried. King Valerian sat upon his throne, a figure of unwavering strength. Broad-shouldered and tall, with hair black as the midnight sea and eyes that glimmered like storm clouds, he radiated a presence that made the air itself seem heavier. Those who approached him felt the invisible weight of his authority pressing down upon them. Yet in that instant when his gaze fell upon Seraphina, there was something different, a flicker of curiosity perhaps, or an unspoken recognition. "Welcome to Valemore," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to echo through the hall. It was not a greeting but a declaration. Seraphina bowed, careful to meet his eyes, though the pull of his presence made her heart race. "Your Majesty," she said softly, her voice carrying the timbre of both respect and quiet defiance. The court fell silent, the tension stretching like a taut string. This union was not merely ceremonial, it was binding, magical in its nature, and both parties understood that their fates were intertwined by forces older than the kingdom itself. Valerian rose from his throne, his steps measured, deliberate, each echo in the hall reverberating against the stone walls. He stopped before her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, yet far enough to leave a space she could still breathe in. "You are here because it is necessary," he said, his gaze piercing yet unreadable. "Not because you wished it, but because destiny chose it. Do you understand?" Seraphina's hands tightened around each other. "I do," she replied. "But understanding does not mean I am not afraid." The king's lips curved slightly, almost a shadow of a smile. "Fear is natural," he said. "Even the strongest feel it when faced with forces beyond their control. That fear may serve you if you allow it to guide your strength instead of weakening it." He turned then, gesturing to the towering windows overlooking the cliffs. Beyond the glass, the sea crashed against the rocks, its roar harmonizing with the wind. The storm mirrored the tension between them, wild and untamed, promising both danger and beauty. "This castle," he continued, "has stood for centuries. Its stones remember the lives that have passed within its walls, the victories and the failures. And now you will walk these halls not as a visitor but as one bound to me and to this kingdom. Everything you are and everything you will become will be touched by this place." Seraphina swallowed, her throat dry. The weight of his words pressed upon her chest, yet within that pressure a spark of determination ignited. She had been chosen for reasons she did not yet understand, but she would not falter. "I will do my best," she said quietly, "to serve, to learn, and to honor this bond." Valerian studied her, as though weighing her words against an invisible scale. Then, in a gesture that startled her, he extended his hand. "Come," he said simply, "let us begin the oath." The hall grew colder as they approached the ancient altar where kings had been crowned and warriors had sworn their allegiance. Candles flickered along the edges, casting shadows that danced like spirits across the walls. On the altar lay a single crystal, glowing faintly, humming with a power that made the air vibrate. "You must place your hand upon the crystal," Valerian instructed, "and speak the vow aloud. This is not mere ceremony. This is the binding of our fates." Serafina hesitated, then slowly lifted her hand, placing it upon the crystal. A shiver ran through her, as if the very essence of the castle was acknowledging her presence. "I pledge my life to Valemore, to its people, and to the one who guides me here," she said. Her voice wavered, but the crystal's light grew brighter, enveloping her hand in warmth. Valerian placed his hand above hers, the light of the crystal now bridging them. A surge of energy ran between them, and for a moment the storm outside seemed to pause, as though the world itself was holding its breath. "You feel it," he said, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. "The bond. It will test you, shape you, and reveal truths you cannot yet imagine." Serafina nodded, feeling the strange connection between them, a tether of fate that pulled at her heart and mind. The intensity of it was overwhelming, yet not entirely unwelcome. Before they could withdraw their hands, a sudden tremor shook the castle. Candles flickered violently, and the crystal pulsed, casting shadows that seemed to move with intent. A voice, low and echoing, seemed to whisper from the walls themselves. Bound by choice or bound by fate, both the king and the Omega stepped back, their hands still tingling from the energy. Valerian's eyes darkened, stormy as the sea beyond the cliffs. "The castle is restless," he muttered. "It senses the bond, and it is never gentle when it senses change." Serafina's heart beat faster. "Change? What does it mean?" Valerian's gaze met hers, sharp yet inscrutable. "It means we are now part of something older than either of us. Something that will demand courage, trust, and sacrifice. Are you ready for that, Omega?" I will try," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Then come. The first night awaits. And with it, you will discover how deep the storm can reach." As they walked toward the private chambers, the corridors seemed longer, darker, as if the castle itself was testing her resolve. Every step echoed in the stone halls, each one a reminder that this union was more than political. It was elemental, a force of nature that neither of them fully controlled. In the quiet moments before the door closed behind them, Valerian paused, turning slightly to face her. "Remember this, Omega," he said, his voice low but firm. "Being bound to me is not merely about obedience. It is about understanding and enduring, and perhaps in time it may be something more, something neither of us can yet name." Serafina swallowed hard, her mind swirling with a storm of emotions: fear, curiosity, awe, and a strange, undeniable pull toward the man before her. She nodded, unable to speak, and let him lead the way into the chamber where their destinies had begun to entwine. As the door shut behind them, a final gust of wind rattled the windows, and the castle seemed to sigh, as though acknowledging the beginning of something irreversible. Outside, the storm resumed its furious song, echoing the turmoil and anticipation that now bound King and Omega together. Neither of them knew what awaited, but both understood this. Once the bond was sealed, there would be no turning back. And in that silence, heavy with expectation, the castle whispered, "The storm has begun, and so has your fate." The morning after the binding, the castle of Valemore felt different. The air was heavy, thick with expectation, as if the very stones had been awakened by the magic of the previous night. Sunlight tried to pierce the heavy clouds, scattering dull beams across the cold floors, but the shadows lingered stubbornly, curling into the corners like silent watchers. Serafina walked through the halls with careful steps. Every echo reminded her of the bond forged yesterday, the invisible thread connecting her to King Valerian. She felt it in her chest, in her pulse, and in the subtle glance of the king whenever she thought he was not looking. It was a strange sensation, at once comforting and suffocating. The servants whispered among themselves as she passed, their eyes a mixture of curiosity and fear. Some had seen the king's temper, others had witnessed his unbending will. Few understood the subtle transformations happening within him or within her. The bond had begun to stir emotions neither could yet name. Valerian appeared suddenly in the hallway, tall and commanding, as though he had stepped from the shadows themselves. His dark eyes followed her, calculating, intense, but not unkind. "You move as though the castle weighs upon you," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Does it feel different?" Serafina looked up at him, surprised by the gentleness hidden beneath his stern expression. "Yes, it feels alive," she admitted, "as though it knows what happened last night, and it watches me." He nodded. "It does. This castle senses change, and you are part of that change. The walls remember the bond we have formed. The magic lingers, and it will test both of us in ways we cannot predict." She swallowed, uncertainty twisting in her stomach. "Test us." "Yes," he said, taking a step closer, the shadows of the hallway shifting with his presence. "Magic is not without consequences. The bond will amplify what is within us, our fears, our desires, our strengths, and our weaknesses. You must be ready for what comes." Serafina's eyes widened, but her voice was firm. "I will try. I will not run." Valerian's gaze softened for a brief moment, almost imperceptibly. "Good. You must understand, Omega, that courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it, and you will need courage every day in this castle." The first days passed slowly, each filled with lessons and observation. Serafina learned the rhythms of the castle, the hidden corridors, and the ways in which the king maintained order. She discovered that Valerian's dominance was not only strength but responsibility, a weight carried for the people of Valemore and the legacy of his ancestors. Yet the bond between them whispered constantly, subtle but persistent. Sometimes, when she lingered in the library or near the high windows, she would feel a pull, as though invisible fingers traced along her heart. And sometimes she would catch Valerian staring, his eyes softened by unspoken emotion or hardened by something darker. It was during one such quiet afternoon that the first true test arrived. The castle's outer gates banged open violently, and a messenger arrived, gasping for breath, soaked by the storm outside. "My king," he cried, "a sorceress has been seen at the forest's edge. She carries dark magic. She seeks you." Valerian's posture stiffened. His eyes narrowed, sharp as knives. "The curse," he muttered under his breath. "It begins." He turned to Serafina, his expression unreadable. "You must stay within the inner walls," he commanded. "It is too dangerous to leave. I will handle this." Serafina's pulse raced, but she did not retreat. "I can help," she said softly, though she knew her voice was drowned by the storm outside. Valerian's gaze held her for a long moment, a mixture of concern and something deeper. Finally, he nodded. "Then you will observe but not interfere, and you will trust me when I say it is necessary." The forest at the edge of Valemore was dark and silent, despite the rain that fell in sheets. The trees bent under the wind, their twisted branches reaching like skeletal fingers toward the ground. Valerian moved among them with fluid precision, every step controlled, every sense alert. Serafina followed at a distance, her heart beating with anticipation and fear. There at the edge of a clearing, the sorceress appeared. Her presence was commanding, unnatural. Dark robes clung to her form, and her eyes shone with a cold, calculating light. She smiled at the sight of the king and the Omega, a cruel curve that promised mischief and danger. "You come," she said, her voice like ice against steel. "The bond it stirs, but it will not save you from the darkness you carry." Valerian's hand went to the hilt of his sword, though he did not draw it. "Leave now," he said, calm but deadly, "or face the consequences." The sorceress laughed, a sound that made the air itself shiver. "Consequences? You have no idea what awaits, Alpha. Your bond with the Omega, it is but the beginning. The castle senses it, yes, but so do I. It will demand more than either of you can give. Serafina felt the words settle into her bones. The bond she thought was protective now seemed fragile, challenged by forces beyond comprehension. She realized that magic, unlike the loyalty of the castle or the people, was unpredictable, wild, and dangerous. Valerian's eyes darkened. "Then let it come," he said. "Whatever trial you bring, I will face it, and I will protect what is mine, what is ours." The sorceress tilted her head as though amused by his confidence. "Yours? Are you so sure, Alpha? The bond is not yours to command. The Omega has a will of her own, whether you accept it or not, and that will decide everything." The words lingered in the clearing, heavy and threatening. Serafina's heart raced. She did not fully understand the bond yet, but she knew it was powerful, and it was hers as much as it was Valerian's. The confrontation passed without immediate violence, though the tension remained, thick as the storm clouds above. Valerian guided Serafina back to the castle, his hand brushing lightly against hers, an almost accidental contact that made her pulse flutter. Neither spoke of it, but both felt it. Back within the castle walls, the storm outside raged, echoing the turmoil within the two of them. Serafina sat by the high window, staring at the cliffs and the crashing waves. The bond pulsed within her chest, a rhythm that matched the storm. Valerian appeared behind her, silent as the shadows. "You do not need to understand everything right now," he said softly. "But you must feel it. The bond, it is more than magic. It is connection, it is trust, and it will demand sacrifices, yes, but also courage and perhaps even affection." Serafina looked up, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "Affection," she whispered. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he placed a hand on the stone ledge beside her, close but not touching. "Do not mistake it," he said. "I am Alpha and I am responsible, but this bond, it is not only power, it is recognition. And it will teach us both what it truly means to care for another." She nodded, unsure what to say. But in her heart, she knew she felt it, the invisible thread that tied her to him, fierce and unyielding, pulling her closer even when she tried to step back. Days passed, and each moment was charged with tension. The castle itself seemed alive, shifting with the energy of their bond. Sometimes Serafina would awaken to find a candle flickering at her bedside, though she had not lit it. Sometimes she would hear Valerian's voice whispering in the corridors, though he was nowhere to be seen. It was during one such night, when the moon cast silver light over the castle's towers, that the bond revealed its strange magic fully. Serafina awoke to a whisper in her mind, not her thoughts, not her voice, but another presence. "Do not be afraid," it said, calm and steady. Her heart leapt. She knew immediately it was Valerian. The bond allowed them to feel each other in ways words could not convey. She responded silently, instinctively. "I am not afraid," she thought. "I want to understand." "Good," came the reply. "There will be trials, darkness approaches, but together we may endure." The connection faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Serafina breathless and trembling. She realized that the bond was not only a tie, it was a guide, a protector, and a test. The next morning, as dawn broke over the cliffs, the sorceress's shadow loomed once more over Valemore. Rumors spread through the kingdom of unnatural storms, of creatures seen in the forests, and of whispers carried by the wind. Serafina knew that the trials were only beginning. Valerian stood beside her on the balcony, looking out at the horizon. "The bond is alive," he said quietly. "It will guide us and it will challenge us. And when the darkness comes, we must not falter. Are you ready, Omega?" Serafina took a deep breath, the wind tangling her hair. "I am ready," she said, "for whatever comes." Valerian's eyes softened, a rare warmth breaking through the storm within him. "Good. Then we face it together. Whatever shadows may fall, we will endure. And perhaps we will find something stronger than either of us imagined." The clouds began to break slightly, letting the first rays of sunlight touch the black stones of the castle. Yet even as the light fell, a distant, eerie laugh echoed through the forests, reminding them both that the world outside was as dangerous as it was magical, and that their bond would be tested in ways neither could yet foresee. The storm had passed, leaving the kingdom of Valemore in a fragile, uneasy calm. Yet the air felt charged, as if the earth itself had absorbed the chaos and held it in a quiet, waiting silence. Within the castle, shadows lingered longer than usual, stretching along the walls like the fingers of unseen watchers. Seraphina moved through the corridors with a mix of purpose and hesitation. Every step reminded her of the bond she shared with King Valerian, a connection that pulsed like a living heartbeat between them. Some days it felt comforting, on others it pressed heavily upon her, a reminder that their destinies were entwined by magic older than either of them. She paused outside the library, where Valerian often spent hours studying the histories of kings and the lore of the castle. Today he was there, seated at a massive oak table, his head bowed over a collection of ancient scrolls. The flicker of candlelight revealed the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightness of his jaw. Something was troubling him, though he had not yet spoken of it aloud. "Your Majesty," Seraphina said softly as she entered. Valerian looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a stormy intensity. "Omega," he acknowledged, his voice low and steady. "The bond, it grows stronger, and with it, so do the shadows that follow." She stepped closer, her heart quickening. "The sorceress," she asked. "Is she still near?" He shook his head, leaning back in his chair. "Not yet, but she will not wait long. The bond has stirred powers that she covets, and soon she will act." Seraphina's gaze fell to the table. "And what should we do?" Valerian's eyes softened, a rare warmth touching his usual stern expression. "We prepare, together. You will learn to trust not only the bond but yourself. Courage comes from understanding your own strength, Omega, and from standing firm even when fear whispers otherwise." Days passed with study and preparation. Seraphina learned to sense the subtle energies of the castle, the way the shadows shifted, the faint hum of magic that resonated through the stone walls, and the whisper of wind that carried secrets. She began to understand the depth of the bond, how it allowed her to feel Valerian's emotions even when he sought to hide them, and how it drew him toward her own courage and resolve. Valerian, in turn, began to let moments of softness slip through his usually unyielding demeanor. He watched her quietly as she moved through the halls, helping servants, tending to the small magical disturbances that the castle sometimes experienced, and studying the lore that might one day help them face the sorceress. Though he rarely spoke of it, a deep admiration and concern for her grew within him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Seraphina found herself in the castle gardens. The air was fragrant with the last blooms of summer, the soft scent mingling with the cool evening breeze. She walked along the stone paths, feeling the bond pulse gently within her chest. Valerian appeared silently beside her, as if he had been there all along. "The storm leaves a mark," he said, his voice quiet. "Not only on the land but on us as well. You feel it, do you not?" Seraphina nodded. "I do. It's like the bond is alive, guiding us, warning us." He studied her, his gaze intense. "And yet it also shows us our weaknesses. It exposes fear, doubt, and hesitation. You must learn to accept them without letting them control you." Her eyes met his, and for a moment the world outside the garden ceased to exist. "And you," she asked softly, "do you ever doubt?" Valerian's jaw tightened and his gaze darkened. "Always," he admitted. "But doubt is not the enemy. Fear is not weakness. It is the choice to rise despite it that defines strength. You have shown me courage, Omega, even when you do not recognize it yourself. That has unsettled me more than any enemy ever could." That night, the castle shivered with another tremor of magic. Serafina awoke to the pulsing warmth of the bond in her chest, stronger and more insistent than ever. Valerian's presence, usually a steady anchor, now carried urgency. She could feel his worry, his tension, and an unspoken need to protect her. She followed the pull to the throne room, where the crystal on the altar glowed with an eerie light. Valerian was already there, his hands hovering above it, eyes closed as though drawing strength from the pulse of the magic. "The bond," he murmured, opening his eyes to meet hers. "It reacts to the presence of other forces. The sorceress is near. She senses it and she will attempt to exploit it." Serafina stepped closer. "What can we do?" He looked at her, his expression both stern and earnest. "We endure. We learn to control it, to channel it, and we trust each other. The bond is not a weapon of dominance. It is a bridge. It will guide us if we allow it." The crystal pulsed again, brighter this time, and Serafina felt a surge of energy connect them, stronger than before. She gasped, feeling a deep understanding, as if the bond whispered truths that words could never express. "You are not alone," it said. "And neither am I. We will face it together," she thought, sending the reply into the invisible thread. Valerian's eyes softened. "Yes," he whispered, "together. Whatever comes, we endure together." The following days were filled with lessons and trials designed to strengthen their connection. Serafina learned to sense subtle shifts in the castle's magic, to understand the warning signs of danger, and to channel the bond's energy in ways that enhanced both her courage and her clarity. Valerian, too, faced a transformation. He had always been a king defined by control, by strength and command, yet the bond revealed to him the power of trust, patience, and empathy. Moments with Serafina became mirrors of his own vulnerabilities, showing him that leadership required not only authority but understanding. One afternoon, while practicing the control of the bond in the high towers, Serafina faltered. A surge of energy overwhelmed her, sending a wave of dizziness through her body. She stumbled, and the wind swept through the tower with unnatural force. Valerian caught her instantly, his arms strong and steady. "Careful," he warned, though his voice carried concern, not anger. "The bond tests us, Omega, not only our strength but our limits. You must not fear it, but you must respect it." She looked up at him, her gray eyes wide with both awe and apprehension. I am learning," she admitted. "It is frightening sometimes, but also beautiful." He regarded her silently, his dark eyes softening. "Indeed, it is not power alone, but connection, and you have taught me something in return. That strength can also be patience, that fear can lead to courage, and that trust it can exist even between the most unlikely of companions." Her heart thumped, and for a moment words seemed unnecessary. The bond hummed between them, a living reminder of what they shared: fear and courage, tension and trust, uncertainty and hope. Yet even as they grew closer, the shadow of the sorceress loomed. One evening, a messenger arrived with a warning. Strange creatures had been seen at the forest's edge, their forms twisted and unnatural. Whispers of dark magic carried through the air, and villagers reported feeling watched, though no eyes were seen. Valerian's expression hardened. "She grows bolder," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "The curse, it is not yet fully realized, but soon it will strike. We must be ready." Serafina felt the weight of the words. "We will be," she said, though uncertainty tugged at her heart. "Together?" "Yes," Valerian agreed, though his gaze lingered on her longer than usual, storm and shadow mingling in his eyes. "Together. And we will endure whatever comes, Omega. But know this, every choice matters. The bond is powerful, but it is fragile. It tests not only strength, but heart and soul." As night fell, the castle seemed to hold its breath. Serafina and Valerian stood side by side, looking out over the cliffs toward the storm-battered sea. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the black towers and the winding paths of the castle below. "I feel it," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the wind. "The bond, it warns us." Valerian's hand brushed against hers, just enough to feel the pulse of connection, the unspoken promise of protection and trust. "Yes," he murmured, "and soon we will be tested in ways neither of us can yet imagine, but together we may prevail." The castle shivered again, as if acknowledging their words. In the distance, a shadow moved across the cliffs, dark and silent, hinting at the sorceress's next move. Cliffhanger. Neither knew what the sorceress had planned, nor how far the darkness would reach. But one truth was certain: their hearts, bound by fate and magic, would face it together, and the storm inside them was only just beginning. The castle of Valemore was alive with tension, each stone vibrating with the pulse of magic. Outside, the wind tore through the cliffs, carrying the distant cries of the storm-tossed sea. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the black towers and casting long, shifting shadows across the battlements. Seraphina stood at the edge of the throne room balcony, the wind tugging at her hair. The bond with Valerian pulsed strongly, urging her to remain calm, to trust, and to act when the moment came. She could feel his presence everywhere, his emotions brushing against hers, his strength anchoring her in the storm. "You feel it too," Valerian said, appearing silently beside her. His cloak whipped in the wind, his dark eyes stormy but steady. "The sorceress is here. She has come to claim what she believes belongs to her." Seraphina nodded, her gray eyes resolute. "Then we face her together. Whatever she brings, we endure together." Valerian's gaze softened briefly, a flicker of warmth amidst the shadows. "Good," he murmured. "And know this, our bond is stronger than any curse, stronger than fear, stronger than darkness. Trust in it and in each other." The great doors of the throne room burst open, and the sorceress entered, her presence heavy with power and intent. Dark robes swirled around her as she moved, her eyes gleaming with a cruel satisfaction. "So, the Alpha and his Omega believe they can resist me," she said, her voice echoing against the stone walls. "Foolish. The bond you share, it is fragile, and soon it will break." Valerian stepped forward, placing himself protectively between Seraphina and the sorceress. "It is not fragile," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It is strong, and together we are stronger than you can imagine." The sorceress laughed, a sound sharp and biting like the wind tearing through dry leaves. "We shall see," she said. Raising her hands, dark energy coalesced into twisting forms that wriggled like living shadows. They surged toward them, hungry for destruction. Seraphina felt the bond flare within her chest, a light of warmth and courage pushing against the darkness. She raised her hands instinctively, feeling the magic of the castle and the pulse of the bond merge with her own will. Energy spiraled around her and Valerian, a shield against the sorceress's shadows. Valerian's eyes softened as he watched her. "Good," he said. "Do not doubt yourself. The bond will guide you. Trust it, trust me." Together they stood as one, their connection radiating power that pushed back the shadows. The sorceress faltered, her eyes narrowing as she felt the strength of something she could not control. The battle continued, the room alive with light and dark, fire and shadow, the walls trembling with the force of magic clashing. Seraphina realized the bond was not only a shield but a key, a way to channel their shared courage, focus their strengths, and create a force beyond anything the sorceress had anticipated. Valerian moved with precision and power, protecting Seraphina while striking at the sorceress with bursts of energy drawn from the bond. Each time their hands brushed, the pulse of the connection surged, reinforcing their strength and deepening their trust. "You are strong," the sorceress hissed, throwing another wave of dark energy. "But even strength can falter, and fear can destroy what even power cannot save." Seraphina's chest tightened at the words, but the bond reminded her of her courage. She felt Valerian's presence steady her, reminding her that fear could exist without controlling her. She lifted her chin, her voice firm. "We are not afraid, and we will not falter, not now, not ever." The sorceress shrieked, her shadows writhing in frustration. The castle itself seemed to hum in response to their defiance, amplifying the bond's energy until the room was bathed in a radiant light that pushed back the darkness entirely. Finally, the sorceress faltered completely. Her energy collapsed in on itself, unable to withstand the unity of the bond. With a final scream of rage, she vanished, leaving the throne room silent but charged with residual power. The crystal on the altar pulsed once, then dimmed, leaving only the steady warmth of the bond between Seraphina and Valerian. Breathing heavily, Valerian turned to her, his stormy eyes now filled with something softer, almost tender. "You did well," he said, his voice low and reverent. "I could not have done this without you." Seraphina's chest heaved, her hands trembling. "We did it together," she said, her voice filled with awe and relief. "The bond, it protected us." Valerian stepped closer, the wind tugging at his cloak, and placed a hand lightly on hers. "Yes," he said, his voice gentle, "and it will continue to protect us, so long as we honor it, so long as we trust each other." They stood in silence for a moment, the pulse of the bond echoing in their hearts, a living testament to their shared courage and connection. In the days that followed, the castle slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though the magic remained subtly alive in every stone and shadow. Seraphina and Valerian spent time together, not as ruler and subject, but as companions, partners, and equals bound by trust, fate, and shared experience. Seraphina grew more confident in her understanding of the bond, learning to sense shifts in energy, to interpret the castle's subtle signals, and to channel her courage in moments of challenge. Valerian, too, had changed. He no longer relied solely on command and dominance, but on empathy, trust, and the understanding that true strength often lay in patience and collaboration. One evening, as the sun dipped below the cliffs, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, they walked together along the highest tower's balcony. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of the sea and the distant cries of gulls. "Do you ever wonder what life would be like," Seraphina asked softly, "if we had never met, if the bond had not brought us together?" Valerian's gaze fell to the horizon, his expression thoughtful. "I do," he admitted. "But I realize now that every choice, every moment led us here, and I would not change it, not for anything. Even the trials, the fear, the darkness, it was all necessary to reach this." She smiled faintly. "So even the storm has its purpose." "Yes," he said, turning to face her. "Even the storm has its purpose, and so do we. Together we can endure anything, and perhaps create something stronger than either of us imagined." The bond pulsed gently between them as they stood side by side, a living thread of trust, courage, and understanding. It no longer felt like a test or a warning. It was a promise, an acknowledgement that their hearts, though tested by darkness and magic, had emerged stronger and more connected than ever. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, Valerian took Seraphina's hand in his, holding it gently yet firmly. "We have endured the storm," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "And now we begin anew, not as Alpha and Omega, not as king and subject, but as two hearts bound by choice, by trust, and by courage." Seraphina's eyes glimmered with tears, not of sadness, but of relief and hope. "Together," she whispered. "Yes," Valerian agreed, his gaze unwavering. "Together, always." The castle seemed to exhale, the shadows receding into the corners, the wind calming, and the storm-tossed sea settling into quiet waves. The bond remained, a radiant thread of connection that would guide and protect them, a living testament to the trials they had faced and the strength they had found in each other. Weeks later, the kingdom of Valemore began to heal. The villagers spoke of the strange storm, of shadows that had passed, and of the courage of the king and his Omega. Yet the true magic remained unseen, alive in the castle and in the hearts of those who had endured the trials together. Valerian and Seraphina walked through the halls hand in hand, their steps quiet but purposeful. They no longer feared the bond. It was no longer a source of uncertainty, but a guide, a protector, and a symbol of the trust and courage they shared. In the quiet moments, they spoke of dreams, of hopes, and of futures yet unwritten. They laughed softly, shared secrets, and strengthened the connection that had been forged in fire and shadow. Each day, they discovered new depths within themselves and in each other, understanding that true power lay not in domination, but in compassion, trust, and mutual courage. And though the world outside remained uncertain, full of potential storms and unseen dangers,